Hi, everybody. It's Matt Robinson, and welcome to the first edition of the Writer's Block on the Soup Network. I am very excited to be expanding my television show and my live series of talks to this format, and very glad that you've all come along. Today on the show, I'll be interviewing my friend and colleague Cameron Lee Cowan, who is not only an author, but one of my partners at Soup and the creator and host of his own very popular and informative podcast, The Cameron Journal. In addition to being a fellow podcaster, Cameron is also a fellow entrepreneur who has also worked in the music industry and designed t-shirts, among other ventures. His previous books include the novel Cast Iron and the short story collection called An Unfinished Coloring Book. But today we're going to focus on the new book, America's Lost Generation, in which Cameron jumps off a popular Reddit thread to explore the issues facing millennials in America today. Welcome, friend Cameron.
Hi, Matt. That's a very commodious intro. I
Well,
appreciate that.
I've been looking.
You're so fancy. You've read, you've prepared, you've written it out. I'd take a look at someone's website and just start talking. So go you for being prepared and put together. That's
I've often told the story. I worked at a radio station in Philadelphia many years ago with a morning talk show, and the host had a lot of authors on and would always seem to have read every book, and I was just dumbfounded that they could do this. And I asked them one day, "How do you keep on top of all these books and these authors?" And she said, "Matt, have you ever noticed how I always say on page such and such, and I quote that page?" She said, "Often that's the only page I've read." So
yes.
a little peek
Yeah.
behind the curtain.
No. That is 100% the case. I have a lot of authors on my show. I do not have time to read all of their books, although sometimes I wish I did because we have very interesting
Oh,
authors on the
absolutely.
show. But
Absolutely.
yes, if I get a few moments to give it a scan and pick out something interesting along the way, that's about as good as it gets. And sometimes the information we talk about them came from the press release.
Yep.
That is some insider baseball, but
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So
Well,
if
let's get a little inside baseball about you. How did you get into writing in the first place?
are we going back that are we going back that far?
Well, like the context.
Yeah, I have been in the writing and publishing industry for 20 years this year.
Wow,
Um,
congratulations.
I thank you. I started when I was 17 years old, and I I liked the whole creative writing storytelling thing, but I knew the business was not that great for it. So I got into business writing mostly first. And then I had already kind of been in some high school journalism programs and things, and I didn't go to school for writing or journalism. I have 2 degrees in political science. Um, and so I got my MFA when in my 30s, so I could actually have a degree in the thing that I do. What a concept. But it yes, the so I started in that, and it was kind of from that I started really kind of developing writing chops. I will tell people right up front, writing was not a natural talent for me. I really couldn't write when I was 12 years old. I could put words on a page, but there wasn't anything to it. It was just kind of ideas in my brain. I was very fortunate that I was able to have a special English writing tutor through high school that kind of turned my brain mess into something we could actually work with. I still don't put commas before and as often as I should have. That's literally half everything else. I don't split infinitives. I don't dangle participles, but half of my Grammarly corrections are you didn't put a comma in front of and or but or any conjunction.
Well,
Just
that's the Oxford comma. That's debatable. So,
yeah,
as
I'm
long
just
as you're
not on that.
consistent.
Yeah, I'm just not on that train. So, but so that's always fun. And then I didn't get it really into this writing that I do now until 2014. I was very lucky. I ran my first publication when I was 21 years old with a budget of $2.5 million. I was very then lucky. I got to work in fashion nightlife for 3 years doing another publication there. So I had already done 2 magazines before I was 25.
Wow.
Um, And then in 2014, kind of following from that, I started what would become the Cameron Journal, which at that time was CameronCowan.net. It was a single column WordPress blog on a free theme. And now it is what it is today. With as of, this moment this morning, we have, I'll even look to see what the exact number is. 2,454 pieces of content, um, most of which has been written by me. And that big library of content started the basis of America's Lost Generation. I had been writing about millennials for years and years. I'd been involved in Occupy Wall Street, which was the beginning of my own political liberalism because I grew up Republican and worked in Republican politics for years and years, including even for some people whose names you know. And then I'd kind of seen how the system was not working for me at that time coming out of the great financial crisis. And so I had written about this from time to time, and there was a lot of dialogue and zeitgeist and all this sort of thing. And then in 2020, I really got inspired to, because it had been so many years out from that moment. It had been 12 years that I really wanted to tell that story. So I started interviewing people to find, what else were they saying and what were their experiences. And every single one is in the book, virtually unedited. And it was quite stark. Of all the people I interviewed, there was the only one that made me laugh was the plumber who wrote in and said, "My life's been fine, everything's been great, but I support what you're doing. Go do it." Sort of thing. That was the funniest one. But yeah, that was kind of how I started. And I didn't even release my first book until 2019, which is What the Hell is Going On, which is now out of print. At my best, I work at the publisher, but at my best sort of thing. That's not a bad thing. I chose to pull it from publication. But then I released my first novel in January of 2020. Not a great time to release a novel. I released my short story collection in March of 2020. The second worst time to release a short story collection with a major journal publishing as the world was shutting down. And then I now have this. I have not released a book in 5 years, very sadly. Partly for COVID reasons. Partly I was in grad school for 2 of those years. I wrote another book. It's sitting right up there in that white docubox being worked on. But this is my first release in a while, and so yeah, it's a very important story to tell. So that's my writing career in a nutshell.
Hmm. Now, with as the format of the book is interviews, how did you know when it was done, when it was a package, as opposed to will there be extras that'll be in the on your website, or is it a volume two coming, or what's the larger plan?
No, I mean, the interviews are part of the story. There's also a lot of research because I compare what happened to millennials to what happened after the 1991 Japanese property crisis. And I look at, our problems with youth unemployment through the lens of the Japanese hikikomori. And I also look at for Japan, this has become a pension crisis. So many people were not able to get jobs in corporate Japan after that. And they had a double dip. They had a property crisis in 91, Asian financial crisis in 97. And so they have now, this many years later, this huge pension problem of all these people who never really paid into the pension, but are due it. And the government has to find the money to afford it. And this is a country with 125% debt to GDP ratio.
Hmm.
So this is, this is not an easy thing. So the book's partly interviews, but it's also a lot of research into Japan, into what happened to them, kind of what the future is for millennials. Spoiler alert, it's bleak. And then also I have a lot of other research about our system. I even get into some outlying things like dating apps, why people chose to either to not have kids or have kids much later. Because it all has the story. And we even get into some things happening in the UK, in Canada. This is even a problem beyond our borders. Housing crisis as well, all of these things. There were so many. I think the hard part about doing this book and why there were some problems in its production and I had to kind of refix it a little bit was there were so many rabbit holes. It was unifying them all into one unified whole that was probably the hard part.
Right.
And so I had to break it into sections and chapters and all this sort of thing to kind of wrap all this together because it is all interconnected, but maybe not all in the ways that you think.
How do you
And
mean?
so, well, for example, when the cost of housing in cities is expensive, it puts a real crimp in your dating life. And that also is connected to people aren't getting married because they can't afford it, because they can't afford housing, because wages are too low. Also, we've done a bad job of creating jobs in not about a dozen major cities in this country because tech is where the growth has been, and all that is happening in about a dozen superstar cities, which causes housing prices to be higher, which causes people to get. You see how all of it's a giant machine. And so, if you want to address the any one of those questions, you have to address the other ones. If
Right.
you're talking about cost of housing, it's like, okay, housing is too expensive. Who cares? Well, you should, because people aren't getting married, they aren't having children, they aren't reaching milestones, they're not growing. Like it has, and some places have this worse. The UK, the property market is a complete disaster for young people. Canada, it's a complete disaster for young people. It's not as bad in the US as it is in those places, but we're not far behind. That's not a bragging point sort of thing. But the reality is it is all of these different factors. It's a nuanced discussion.
Mm.
And that was the one thing in all the books that I read in support of this that I noticed that was lacking in the marketplace. There were lots of books on the numbers. I read one called Theft of a Decade. Wait till you've read Social Security actuarial tables. It's really thrilling stuff. I also, read all this journalism and reportage and the zeitgeist, which I'd known so well because I was a young person in the 2010s when every publication seemed to really enjoy finding every single person in America who wanted to kind of shit on us, sort of thing. And so it was combining all of that together. But I noticed that there was no one telling real stories from real people, real voices of real millennials. That was the first problem. And second, that no one was addressing the total big picture.
Right.
And I think part of that was distance. You need distance. You don't get good writing about a war till about a decade, 20 years out, sort of thing. We had to get some distance from the great financial crisis to really kind of understand what the problem is. And so it was felt like a good time. And interestingly enough, I'm not sad this book has taken so long to come out because it's gotten us even more distance and more perspective. And I kind of had to slip in some stuff about Gen Z as I was finishing the manuscript because now they're facing many of the similar problems coming out of the pandemic, you know, trying to be a young person going into an economy that is in flux, in change. I have much sympathy to them. We had the same thing, sort of thing. And so I had to start kind of forward looking to be kind of like, and if you think millennials had it bad, Gen Z in some ways has it worse. Although Gen Z, here's the difference of not graduating into recession. Gen Z home rates are higher than they were for millennials at the same age, and their net worth is higher than millennials at the same age.
Mm.
That's not graduating into the worst recession since the Great Depression. That wealth difference, that's it.
Mm.
And that is something that has been a very uncomfortable conversation for people. And Japan kicked the can down the road. I mean, they ignored it for decades. And now they have this pension crisis that they don't know how to solve. And kind of one of the messages, I don't say it explicitly, but one of the messages is, yeah, you cannot address the problems of people who are now in their 30s and 40s. The oldest millennial is 45 this year. You cannot address those issues, certainly, but it's gonna come bite you.
Right.
It's already bitten the Japanese.
Right.
So perhaps we should take notes, learn from that. And that's kind of a big takeaway. Also, millennials aren't teenagers anymore. That's, I think, a big problem is everyone still thinks of us as, flighty 20 somethings. And it's like, no, the youngest of us is 31. Like, the oldest of us is 45. We're people now,
Right.
incidentally. I know that's kind of shocking to hear, but like, we're people now with regular people problems. And the narrative still has yet to shift around that.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you meant it to be like observational, or are there implicit or explicit lessons that you're trying to share so maybe we can do better than Japan, etc.
Well, I had a lot of requests for solutions in the editorial process. Probably the biggest piece of feedback I ever got on the book was, well, what do we do? And I'm kind of like, at this point, not much.
Hmm.
The time to do something was about 10 years ago. Um, Now we're pretty well locked in with what's coming, sort of thing. And the reality is generationally, you are going to have a poverty problem among senior citizens in this country that's probably unmatched since the 19th century.
Mm.
You the boomers dying and the massive transfer of wealth to the tune of $84 trillion is going to help a lot. For some, not all. There's plenty of broke boomers who have nothing to leave behind, nothing to pass on. That will help many in the middle and upper middle class sort of thing. But if you are, a millennial child of working class boomer parents, the chances of you falling into pretty appalling poverty in your old age is now quite high. I don't think, barring the complete restructuring of the American economy and a severe curb on wealth inequality, capitalism, sort of thing, and anything short of the New Deal at this point isn't going to really help anybody. As far as, fertility and having children goes, that ship is sailing quickly.
Mm.
Now, the millennials are starting to have children in greater numbers coming out of the pandemic. That's kind of the good news. Millennials will not do as their parents did and have more children than them. The boomers did something very wise. They had more children. They're the America's largest generation before us. They had so many kids, the millennials took their spot, sort of thing. We're not going to have more children than there are of us because there are so many of us. But we are starting to have children in some number, which is very helpful. But even solving that problem, you have 5 to 10 years, maybe. Um, I would maybe start working on getting Gen Z to have kids, and a lot of them in volume, sort of thing. That might be a better bet. At this point, I mean that some of these things are baked in at this point,
Mm.
and that and I this is a series of policy failures stretching back to the Reagan administration and some of them even to Nixon, sort of thing, that caused this unique set of conditions. Um, Tackling the student loan crisis would certainly help, but Biden was the only one to attempt it, and it got struck down in the courts by and large. The Trump administration has restructured the program in such a way that we're looking at massive defaults. They're already at 11% as we're recording this on the 12th of August, 2025. So, I mean, things like that, you've had successive presidential administrations in both parties who have not prioritized anyone under 50 in this country. If you're over 50, you're getting prioritized in a very real way. Um, and you are and you every policy decision, including bailing out assets and not people, has been made for you. It has come at the expense of anyone under 50.
Right.
Your parents and grandparents are stealing money from you. Where we once used to take money from their purses and wallets, they're now taking it all back and then some, and futures and retirement and wealth building and everything else. So again, it's not a pleasant picture. And people get a little mad at me about that. And I'm kind of like, no, it's bad. And it's gonna get worse. I guess I am I'm spiritually Russian of being like things are bad and they'll continue to get worse. Vodka, like that's like that. It's yeah. I mean, it's bad and it's gonna get worse, unfortunately.
So is there a volume two, or what's next on your docket? The book behind you?
Probably. I've been playing in nonfiction for quite some time. I haven't really touched fiction outside of grad school where I did that big box over my head.
Mhm.
So yeah, the next one is probably going to be that it's historical fiction. It's Downton Abbey set in the American South.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's lots of upstairs, downstairs, white and black, class struggle, racial struggle, this sort of thing.
Mm.
So yeah, it's unfortunately it has a couple issues because I wrote it in the context of a grad school program. It has been so workshopped and kind of so overworked. It needs to be shorter than it is. It's too long. And I need to breathe some life back into it. It's had maybe too many chefs in the kitchen a little
Mm.
bit. A couple different advisors, including one who I think had never seen Gone with the Wind and it didn't know half the stuff that I was writing about. So It's a little overwrought with too much detail, some of that. I have to turn it back into a book that sounds like I wrote it. Like, because right now it's been written by about every grad session, every advisor, every class and seminar, and it needs to, it's kind of lost my voice. And so I need to put some soul back into
Okay.
it.
Well, I usually like to end with what's coming up next, but I did want to ask you about soup and how you got involved and what, how it's been changing and growing and what it offers. So can we talk about that for a minute?
Absolutely. So I obviously we're on the Soupcast podcast network, which we're very, very happy to be doing and launching. You're the one of two new shows that are not pre-existing that we're launching on the Soupcast network, which is a really exciting moment for us. But I met our founder, Wade Franson, 2.5 years ago. I coming out of grad school, was planning on going into academia. I wasn't I was ready to get out of the content creator life sort of thing. And none of that worked out. Harvard said no. The American Library in Paris said no. American Library in Berlin did not appreciate that my application apparently was written in both English and German. They were not impressed.
Hmm.
So it was all no's across the board from all of that. And and so I was kind of trying to see what was going to happen because all of my plans kind of crumbled, sort of thing. And then I met Wade through another contact, and he was, doing soup, and we've been in business for 13 years. We've been in business 10 years at that time. And we talked initially about, the anthology program, and I thought maybe I would do one or two sort of anthologies as a side thing, but it was a nice side income. It was a job. It was some experience, and it seemed like just the sort of thing someone with an MFA should be doing. It is then kind of expanded into now I'm the director of publications and anthologies and executive producer of the podcast network. So the role expanded a lot in the 2.5 years since then. And it's just been finding new and better ways to market authors and books and to sell books. And that's now included platform building, which we kind of were doing for authors anyway, only now we're doing it for real and offer it as a service to people. We knew so many people with podcasts and wanted authors to have a place where they could come and be on a few podcasts at once. And I'd always wanted to expand the Cameron Journal into more than just me sort of thing. So that was another area for Wade and I to partner together. Um, and it's been a fun and interesting interesting ride. The amount of growth and expansion we've had in the last 6 months is crazy. It's sometimes incredibly overwhelming for all that's going on and all the new faces that we're meeting and talking to and all the new people coming in. Today, I met with a new potential author for our hybrid program. We had a book out in March. We have a new anthology coming out in October. My book will be out in September. This is the most books we'll publish in a 12-month calendar period. I think in the history of the company,
Wow.
certainly while I've been here. So yeah, it's been crazy, but it's been really wonderful. And Soup is an amazing and fun organization. I was very, very blessed. I had terrible chronic fatigue from long COVID
Hmm.
for a long time. And my ability to do this work around my health um has been a godsend, really. I mean, most people are not that lucky,
Right.
sort of thing. And I was very, very fortunate to be able to do this while navigating all of that and having a lot of kindness and respect for all of that and all that process. So it's been a lot of fun, and welcome to the Soup family.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful to be part of it, and I look forward to many more of these episodes, and we hope to see you all there. Thanks, Cameron, for joining me, and thanks all of you for joining me on the Writer's Block. See you next time.